Okay, this is going to be a quick impromptu little discussion about how it is that the IT version of an amulet and its behaviors is a little bit different than from the commercial version. First of all, the IT version is in essence built into amulets in their structure. And when I say that, I mean that basically it is understood that possession and ownership of an amulet belongs to an entity. And the design is such that the entity that it belongs to is actually favored to be a corporation. Now, the way the user normally sees it is that they're used to seeing it, and you've seen us log into our demos, they're used to seeing it in the context of a single login to the Hive, and the Hive being a container for a bunch of amulets belonging to that person. However, in actual practice, that's not the way it is. Within the Hive structure, and you have to understand that in the Hive is nothing more than a container with a Hive header, which itself is, believe it or not, an amulet. So you have a Hive header, and then you have 1 to n number of amulets. Now, all the amulets are linked by the fact that they have an identifier within them that identifies the header ID of this Hive, and only this Hive, so that an amulet identification, unique identification, is comprised of 2 parts. Its own ID in combination with the Hive header from which it originated. And that's very important. The Hive header identifies the owner, as it were, of the Hive. And this is important for audit trailing purposes and stuff, so we know that anyone who is responsible for the deployment of an amulet, its use in any form or fashion, is tied to the Hive it came from, and that Hive header then tells you who the owner is. It has a bunch of information that is collected from the account information at the time. This is normally a Hive is created online via central online authority that you log into, and you purchase or acquire by some means the rights to create a certain number of amulets that you can then put into a specific Hive. You submit the Hive if you already have one, and you can add to it, or you get a new one created. In any case, at the time you do that, certain ownership information known to you to the system is recorded into the Hive header, enciphered, of course, for safety's sake and everything. So at the end, so essentially, as a consumer unit, this is an integral, secure piece. You have a Hive header identifying the owner and all the amulets. However, the Hive header itself has information in it that allows it to be hierarchical, which means that you can say, I, as the Hive header, of course, belong to somebody, to some organization. And you can say, I am a child of, obviously for consumers, so we don't consider this, we say child of, and we can point to another Hive. Okay? And that Hive can then be, in its own turn, can be a child of. So we can set up these hierarchical relationships among Hives that all belong to the same owner, to establish for an organization a hierarchy that mimics what they may have in their Active Directory. So, let's say that in their Active Directory tree, they have something that's akin to the org chart. Well, let's say, okay, we have, let's say for the sake of argument, we've got HR department, we've got manufacturing, we've got office staff, we've got sales. Now, the organization itself will have a Hive, And then Hive could, technically, consist of nothing but of the Hive header. But ordinarily, you would have the Hive header would then contain certain amulets. And those amulets, in this case, would likely say that anything at the organizational level is tied to this Hive header and tells us that we are the owner. But it also may say that if the file is ever found outside this organization, it cannot run. So it would have an amulet perhaps in here, one, two, or however many, but it would have amulets in there that might constrain the existence of the amulet to Ethernet backbone, internet substructure, or file servers, or some other, or GPS locations, or something else that constrains it to the purview of the organization. So what you can do, these amulets can be combined. And so you could have the content provider create an amulet, and that content provider would create the amulet, and then around it he would be compelled by the application that the organization owns to automatically include the organization's organizational amulet. And what that would do, and it can be wrapped in one or two forms, it can be layered like an onion, where you have on the outside, you might have the corporate amulet. In which case, what happens is this goes to the framework. The framework says, hey, the terms of the corporate amulet met. Only then will it unwrap an inner amulet that would then be the author's amulet. And he, of course, knows who has the rights to see his work product. But by doing it this way, the author retains his right. He doesn't really have to know anything. All he has to do is meet his requirement to add this whenever it's required. And so this corporate amulet then ensures that the corporation's interests over and above that of the authors are met, so that nobody can see even if the author says, oh, well, anybody in the world is allowed to see it, the corporation can say, no, not so fast, only things within on our Ethernet backbone or whatever it might be. So that's one way we can allow the organization to control, and then of course they could have subsets. Now they could have one for HR here, inside here, where HR has its own set of amulets that then constrict it to the HR or org chart, or physical locations, or personnel within their department, or ActiveX directory, whatever they want to do. In that case, so you'd have three layers. You'd have the corporate overarching, you'd have the HRs constrain to the department, and then of course the authors would be internal. So that's kind of the idea of the way, and we call it onion layering, but we've got to find a better term for it. But essentially, this is one means by which you can control. That's a little bit expensive to do that, because what happens is that then this is three different processes as far as the amulet is concerned. As far as the amulet framework is concerned, it's three different processes and stuff, but it's fairly trivial. Shouldn't be a problem per se in most situations. Obviously, if you're doing 1,000 of these for a file server situation, that might be a different story. And there's some efficiencies you can gain there, but that's mainly so that's one way of allowing the organization to control. And as you can see, it has nothing to do with amulets. A gentleman named Zack, who we talked to the other day, very nice guy, in a investor thing. He happened to be technical, and we were doing a presentation for non-technical people. And he started asking questions about this in terms of IT, and unfortunately, we weren't able to, within the presentation time, we had to answer his questions. But the purpose here we're doing now is to address those more sophisticated questions that he was asking, which are what we would expect from a more technical audience, who are already knowledgeable about something about what we're doing. He is not familiar yet with our product, but he's obviously very astute, has been involved with this before, got the basic concept very quickly, and so then immediately jumped to this bigger issue, because his focus, of course, is IT, which is good for us because IT was our original focus. The only reason we haven't addressed IT has nothing to do with the functionality of our product. It has to do with the fact we don't have any damn money. In order to support all of this, we have to have infrastructure that says we have centralized login It basically allows the Hive headers and stuff to be created in a centralized login and then distributed to people who are asking for permission to create these amulets. We don't have that yet. That's a matter of the simple fact that I am not internet web developer. These are things we'll probably see on the back side of the thing. We're going to develop these in Blazor server, which I can do. It hadn't evolved by the time I started this. It has since evolved. It looks like it's competent enough if we do that. So we may do it Blazor server if we go that route and we can't get any resources whatsoever. We'll build it in Blazor server and we'll just live with it that way. So I could potentially build this. It'd probably take me 3 to 6 months. So we need that piece for the Hive header. We also have another component that we need that has it's related to anything that we do, and that's the AMULET editor itself. Right now, the only AMULET editor we have is for the Windows environment, which is very restrictive for a couple reasons. We can get by for a certain period of time, but it's kind of clunky. And I was always going to rewrite it, but I always said no. We'll do it when we know we have to put it online, because we do not have to want to write AMULET editors for all of the environments out there. We don't want to write it for Apple OS. We don't want to write it for Mac stuff. We don't want to have to write it for Snow Leopard. We don't have to write it for Unix. We don't want to have to write it for every other flavor. And we don't have to certainly want to write it for iPhones and anything, or Android, or anything else that has to do with any of the environments we support. And we support all of those. So at the end of the day, we have to have that AMULET editor, which is an online tool. That is a very sophisticated piece to try to do as an online thing. It was complicated to write even in the Windows environment. But again, we can do that with Blazor. And again, if I have to, that's what we'll do. It'll take us a year to get there, but we'll have to see. We have to. It's a catch-22 situation for us. We've spent all our efforts and stuff on underlying pieces, which includes encryption, the ability to do all this stuff rapidly. Fast, we've been able to demo that we can do that and stuff, but that's never, the nature of the world is that's never good enough. So we have to have the money in order to build these more sophisticated pieces that address a wider audience. In order to get the money, we have to have the demo. So we'll see what happens. But I wanted to go further into this. Now, we've shown what happens when we wrap these amulets around there in order to deal with a situation where the corporate wants to make sure they have some claim of ownership as they would in a standard file server system, where they basically use file server access rights and their physical location on a hard drive to control access to the thing. Well, that's very archaic. It doesn't work very well. And of course, the problem with that is that it only works on that server. As soon as somebody puts it on the internet, they've got to figure out some other way to provide security for it and stuff. We don't have any of those problems because we're AMULET. Everything's protected all the time. It's always enciphered. So in our case, we are the perfect solution for that. And we have this very, very elegant way that's built into AMULETs in the way they're designed. Now, there's one other thing for reasons that corporate like to have control of things, and we can support something that actually the current rather archaic thing cannot do. We can support a situation where it can. Right now, if an employee makes them aware that they're going to quit, they can do some things to keep that employee from taking away all their access to various assets and stuff that they might own within a corporation. But that mechanically has to be done. An IT person has to go to Active Directory, shut off their stuff, go to the file system, turn all their keys off and stuff like that. It's a mechanical process. It gets screwed up all the time. They'll miss half of it, and they'll get half of it right. And hopefully the employee's not a bad guy, and so he doesn't exploit the gaps that are there. On the other hand, some hacker acting on his behalf might not have that same moral consideration, so you've got that problem. It's all garbage. It never worked well. Anyone who's ever been in an IT environment understands all the limitations, and I won't go into all that. You can look on the internet with all of the instances of reasons and ways that doesn't work. So let's go. So what we do is it can be a little bit different. Now, in addition to doing the onion layering, we also, most of our amulets, we have the ability to, anytime you want, you can add amulets. Amulets are additive on a peer-to-peer basis at any time. For that matter, you can do the onion layer anytime either. But you can add any number of amulets to a digital asset on a peer-to-peer basis. And all that does is says when the AMULET framework looks at the digital asset, it gets a list of all the amulets that are attached to it. And it simply says, basically accumulates all of the criteria associated with all, and the first time it gets to one that doesn't pass muster, it denies access. So the rule is, anytime you have aggregated amulets, all of the criteria in those amulets have to be satisfied in order for the digital access. So it's just pure flat. But this is very useful when you want to deny access to somebody who might be an author. In here, they have created this thing, have rights to it otherwise, and now is that disgruntled employee, potentially disgruntled employee. You don't have to go to IT, you don't have to do any damn thing. All you have to do is dynamically change the amulet. Okay, so let's say you added for every amulet, let's say you had a corporate policy, and for every corporate policy, they automatically get an author's access amulet. AAA. And I actually used this in when I originally designed this damn thing. I got to find AAA is not the best way to go, but it was when I designed it. That's what I used. AAA, author's access amulet. What that does, that says, look, the author's access, basically is tied to some entry in Active Directory, Kerberos, whatever the organization uses to authenticate and assign relative positioning to employees. It can be any one of those things, but let's say it's Active Directory. So what happens is with the author's access amulet, all it is, it says, the author of this is such and such. Is he currently a member in good standing of the Active Directory, whatever it might be? Yes or no, so yes, no question. And so this is by changing that, either in the Active Directory or changing the amulet itself, which these things are dynamic. You can, as long as they're online or accessible on your server or something like that, you can easily change them at any time. So when the employee leaves, you change this, or you change his, or you can do the old-fashioned way and change his access in Active Directory. Either one will work. But in any case, so that makes it very simple because this will be the first one in the chain. You'll simply say, oh, this guy that wrote this thing is not in the Active Directory anymore, access denied. So if you want to turn around then and add access and say, okay, well, give some other offer, so you just want to deny him access. So you can also sit there and say, and replace these amulets and with another author, or you can sit there and say, okay, well, we don't care about the author anymore. We'll have this instead, this subset thing. So there's all the things you can do, which are modifiable. But I wanted to go through this brief thing, and I think I'll send this video to Zack or whatever. I'm sorry for the informality of it. It's late at night and stuff like that. So I don't want to throw it together. I don't know. I think Zack is, in fact, I don't know the gentleman. I think he's, in fact, here in California somewhere. I do not know where. If he has access to a whiteboard, I'd love to do this on a whiteboard together. And I wanted to throw this out there. I will send it to Lalith, see what he thinks of it, and we'll send it out and we'll see what the reaction to it is. If the reaction is positive, I'll do a more formal version, something a little bit nicer. I'll address it a little later. And we'll do something that maybe we can put on the internet, maybe on my web page or maybe on theirs, that we can talk about this stuff. But I just want to run through a quick one tonight. I'll shoot this out to Lalith, see what he thinks, and thank you much. Appreciate your time. Oh, by the way, let me give you the time and date stamp just in case. It's May 7th, approximately 9 p.m., year 2020. Thank you much. Take care. Okay.